Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are looking at something that honestly is going to sound a bit radical to some of you listening.
Yeah, it definitely takes a paradigm shift to really grasp what we're doing here today.
Right. Because on August 16th, 2026, which was just 4 days ago, a really beloved American actress and singer died very suddenly.
It was a massive shock. I mean, the whole world is basically still reeling from it.
Totally. And today, it's August 20, 2026. And we aren't going to sit here and wait for the coroner's report.
No, we're not.
We aren't looking at toxicology screens or cable news speculations. We are taking the exact minute of her death, and we're feeding it into a 1,000-year-old medieval binary computer system.
Which sounds like science fiction when you say it out loud like that.
It really does. But we want to see if this method, this thing originally used by desert mystics, can tell us exactly what went wrong in that room.
Yeah. And I want to be clear right up front. We are treating this as a real working investigative judgment. We're using a very ancient, very rigid analytical tool.
Right. But before we get into the actual results, and they are intense, I need to stop and just voice what I'm sure you, the listener, are probably thinking right now.
Which is probably a lot of skepticism, right?
Exactly. I look at this premise and my brain immediately goes, well, this is just confirmation bias, you know?
Yeah, of course.
We know she died. We know it was incredibly sudden. So aren't we just, like, forcing these medieval shapes to fit the tragedy we already know about?
Right, like we're just projecting our grief onto a Rorschach test.
Exactly. How do we know this geomantic chart isn't just spitting out random noise?
That is exactly the skepticism you should be bringing to this deep dive.
Okay.
Honestly, if you aren't skeptical, you aren't paying attention.
Good. So I'm not crazy.
Not at all. But here's the thing. Geomancy is not a crystal ball. You don't stare into a bowl of water and, just wait for a vision.
So it's not like reading tea leaves.
No, not at all. It is a highly constrained mathematical system. It's much closer to running a rudimentary algorithm.
Okay, an algorithm. How does that actually work in practice?
Well, the initial inputs are randomized, sure. But the resulting output is locked into a totally rigid structural logic.
So if you put in garbage, you get garbage out.
Exactly. If the input is just random noise, the chart usually outputs this contradictory, nonsensical mess. It literally refuses to tell a cohesive story.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize it had built-in failure states like that.
It does. But when a chart aligns with this terrifying, literal precision to the material reality of an event like this one does, it forces you to pause.
Right.
We aren't forcing the shapes. The shapes have these rigid, fixed definitions that have been documented for centuries. We're simply reading the code they generated.
Okay, so let's explain the physical mechanism behind that code for you guys listening who might be uninitiated.
Yeah, that's a good place to start.
You called it an early form of computing, which I find absolutely fascinating. Historically speaking, how did someone actually cast one of these geomantic charts?
So historically, it started in the sands of the Middle East. It was known as Ilm al-Raml, which translates to the science of the sand.
The science of the sand. I love that.
It's very poetic, right? But the practice is highly mechanical. A practitioner would basically take a stick and poke random lines of dots in the dirt.
Just totally random.
Yeah, completely random, while holding a specific question firmly in their mind. You do this 4 times, so you create 4 distinct horizontal lines of dots.
Okay, got it. 4 lines in the sand.
Right. And then you count them. If a line has an odd number of dots, it gets 1 mark. We call that active.
Okay.
And if it has an even number, it gets 2 marks. And we call that passive.
Oh, wait. So it's literally just zeros and ones,
Yeah.
odd and even.
Exactly. It is a pure binary system. The top line represents fire, the second is air, the third is water, and the bottom line is earth.
So every figure is a stack of these 4 elements, either turned on or off.
Precisely. When you combine those 4 lines of active and passive states, you generate a specific shape.
A figure. And how many possible shapes are there?
Because of the binary math, there are exactly 16 possible figures. No more, no less.
Okay, so you poke the dirt, you get 16 possible shapes. Then what?
Well, you cast the first 4 figures this way. Those are called the mothers. And from those 4, through a very strict process of binary addition, you generate the next 4.
Which are the daughters, right?
The daughters. Then you add those together to get the nieces and so on. You keep going until you populate an entire chart of 12 houses, kind of like an astrological wheel.
So the randomness only exists in that very first step with the stick.
Exactly. After those first 4 mothers are generated, the math takes over completely. The rest of the chart is locked in by the algorithm.
The mathematical symmetry of that is just, I mean, it's incredible when you think about medieval scholars doing this by candlelight.
It really is. It's a cascading equation.
Okay, well, let's unpack this cascading equation. What does the Earth actually say about this sudden tragedy?
We should probably start with the 30,000-foot view first, just the broad strokes.
Yeah, let's do that. Because when I look at this chart as a whole, doing just a rapid sweep of the 12 houses, the first thing that hits me is the sheer repetition.
Oh yeah, the repetition here is deafening.
Like the same figures just keep showing up over and over again in different houses.
And in classical geomancy, repetition is everything. It operates almost like an echo in a canyon.
How do you know?
Well, it forces you to look at the shape of the walls that are bouncing the sound around. When a figure repeats, it shows where the energy of the event is actively flowing.
Or in this case, violently shifting.
Exactly. And in this chart, we have some immediate glaring anomalies right out of the gate.
Yeah, like the sore thumbs of the chart. Walk us through those.
Okay, so first we have the figure via, which translates to the way. It represents raw, unmitigated movement. And it repeats in house 1 and house 6.
Just pure movement. Okay.
Then we have Cauda Draconis, which is the tail of the dragon. This signifies a purge, a drain, or an exit, and that repeats in house 2 and house 5.
A purge. Wow.
Yeah. And finally, we have Tristitia. This is the figure of profound, heavy sorrow, and it echoes in both house 9 and house 11.
So just stepping back, movement, exit, and sorrow. I mean, that paints a rather grim picture before we even dig into the specific technical definitions.
It really does. If we connect this to the bigger picture, think about what a chart of a peaceful passing in old age would actually look like.
Right, like someone passing away quietly in their sleep at 90. What would that look like?
You'd expect to see figures of stillness, maybe a figure like quiescence, or figures that are heavily weighted with passive earth.
Things that indicate a slowdown.
Exactly. A slow, natural fading of the bodily systems. Just a peaceful stopping.
But this chart, it isn't that.
No, this chart is the exact opposite. The atmosphere is filled with themes of sudden acceleration, deep structural sorrow, literal physical loss, and then ultimate restriction.
So right off the bat, the chart is validating the premise of our question.
100%. It immediately confirms a sudden and deeply impactful physical event. There is no peace in this chart.
Okay, let's start walking through the structural spine of this reading. In geomancy, just like in astrology, the 1st, 4th, 7th, and 10th houses are called the angles.
Right, they're the load-bearing pillars of the entire reading.
So let's start with house 1. In a health or an event chart like this, house 1 represents the subject, right? The patient.
Yes, it shows their physical condition at the exact time of the event.
And in house 1 here, we have via.
We do. And via is structurally very unique among the 16 figures. It is composed of 4 single dots stacked vertically on top of each other.
So it's active fire, active air, active water, active earth.
Exactly.
So using our binary analogy from earlier, it's 1, 1, 1, 1.
Yep, all lines are active.
It's like a car with the accelerator pushed to the absolute floor. Just
Yeah.
pure action across every element with absolutely no rest whatsoever.
That is honestly the perfect way to visualize it. In the first house, which is the physical body of the subject, having every single elemental line active indicates total, uncontrollable instability.
Because the body shouldn't be fully active in every single element like that, right?
Right. It's rapid transition. There's no homeostasis here. And in biology, survival basically relies on homeostasis.
Which is the body's ability to maintain a stable internal environment even when external things are changing.
Exactly. Via is the complete destruction of that homeostasis. The body was undergoing a systemic, incredibly fast-moving change. It's pure, unadulterated momentum.
Which is terrifying when you're talking about a human body in a medical crisis. You don't want momentum in an emergency. You want stabilization.
You want to slow things down.
Yeah.
Via is speeding it all up.
Okay, so that's the physical state in house 1. Then we move down to house 4.
The fourth house. This one represents the root, the foundation, and ultimately the hidden base of the matter.
And here we have a figure called Rubeus, or the red.
Yes, Rubeus.
Structurally, Rubeus is passive fire at the top, active air, passive water, and passive earth at the bottom. So, 2, 1, 2, 2. Why does a notoriously violent figure show up at the literal base of this chart?
It's deeply unsettling. Rubeus is an incredibly heavy, difficult figure. Think about its shape. A single active dot of air trapped between layers of passive elements.
So it's like this one spark trapped in all this stillness.
Exactly. It's characterized by heat, danger, excess, intoxication, and passionate disturbance.
Intoxication, that's a loaded word in this context.
It is. The active air lines suggest this sudden flare-up of volatile energy. But because the earth and water lines below it are completely passive, that energy doesn't have the proper channels to ground or cool itself.
It just kind of burns out of control.
Yeah, it's like a fire breaking out in a sealed room. There's nowhere for the pressure to go.
So because House 4 represents the underlying cause and the foundation of the event, finding Rubeus here tells us what exactly?
It tells us that the root of this sudden death was deeply, deeply volatile. It wasn't just a quiet failing of the heart muscle due to old age.
Right.
It was a fiery, disturbing root cause. It implies excess, danger, or toxicity at a foundational systemic level.
Okay, so we have this volatile, perhaps intoxicating or excessive root cause in House 4, and that is driving the rapid, unstable physical momentum we just saw in House 1.
Precisely. The root feeds the state of the body.
Let's look across the chart to House 7. In a personal health chart, the 7th house represents partners, opposing forces, or, crucially, the physician or the medical counterpart.
Right. It's whoever's on the other side of this crisis trying to intervene.
And here we have Fortuna Minor, which means lesser fortune. This is active fire, active air, passive water, passive earth. 1, 1, 2, 2.
This brings us to a really critical point about the interventions that actually occurred in that room.
What does Fortuna Minor tell us about those interventions?
Well, look at the structure. It's totally top-heavy. It has the active, striving energy of fire and air at the top, but it completely lacks the grounding of earth or the sustaining, cooling flow of water at the bottom.
So it's all effort up front, but nothing to back it up.
Yes. Historically, it is a figure of success, but it is specifically temporary success. It represents a tactical advantage that requires constant, exhausting effort just to maintain.
Meaning the medical intervention burns bright and fast, but it just can't last. It's like a sparkler versus a campfire.
That's a great analogy. So when we look at the counterpart here, the medical help, the first responders, whoever was present, attempting to pull her back from the edge, this figure signifies that they offered only fleeting support.
So they might have actually helped for a second.
Yeah, they might have achieved a momentary advantage. Perhaps they managed to restore a pulse temporarily, or they administered an emergency intervention that briefly seemed to be working.
But because it's lacking that passive water and earth.
Exactly. Without that base to sustain it, the intervention couldn't hold back the tide. The support was fundamentally structural, but it was incredibly temporary.
Man, that's heavy. And that leads us to the culmination of these 4 angles, House 10. The 10th house represents the visible outcome, the public standing, the final physical prognosis.
The end of the road.
Right. And here we find carcer, which translates to prison. Structurally, it's active fire, passive air, passive water, active earth. A dot at the top, 2 in the middle, 2 in the middle, a dot at the bottom, 1, 2, 2, 1.
It visually resembles an enclosure, like a wall or a literal cell.
Yeah, it looks totally closed off.
And what's fascinating here, mechanically speaking, is the extreme contrast. Think about the massive tension between House 1 and House 10.
Okay, so House 1 is via, total movement, 1, 1, 1, 1.
Right. And House 10 is carcer, 1, 2, 2, 1. Total restriction, confinement, holding fast.
It's the biological equivalent of that car we mentioned going 100 miles an hour and then just hitting a solid concrete barrier.
That is exactly what it is. The visible outcome is ultimate containment and physical restriction. That rapid transition of via crashed directly into the absolute unyielding wall of carcer.
And in the context of a public figure, House 10 also represents how the event is seen by the world, right?
Yes, it represents the public narrative, a full, definitive, shocking stop.
There is no ambiguity in carcer.
None. It is the finality of the physical body being contained. The biological machinery simply seized, it locked up.
Wow. It's an incredibly stark structural narrative just from those 4 pillars.
Very stark.
I mean, let's recap that. A volatile, excessive root in Rubeus, causing a rapid, systemic acceleration in via, which was met with frantic but failing interventions with Fortuna Minor, resulting in a sudden, catastrophic physical stop in carcel.
That is the skeleton of the entire event right there.
But to really understand the nuance, we need to flesh out the rest of the chart. So let's look at House 2 and House 5. Both of these contain Cauda Draconis, the dragon's tail.
Right. Cauda Draconis is composed of active fire, active air, active water, and passive earth. So that's 1, 1, 1, 2.
Okay.
It's this rushing, exiting energy. The top 3 elements are highly active, pushing everything downward. But the earth line, the foundation at the bottom, is passive.
Meaning what? Doesn't catch anything.
Exactly. It doesn't build, collect, or solidify. It merely empties out. It represents an exit, a purge, a severance, and a very sharp decline.
And its placement in the chart is what makes this so descriptive. House 2 governs resources, assets, and the body's internal physical treasury.
Yes.
And House 5 governs pleasure, creativity, and the physical expression of vitality.
So placing this purging, emptying figure in the houses of physical security and vitality is deeply significant.
It's literally draining her reserves.
Yes, it shows a massive, unstoppable draining of life force. Whatever physical resources, resilience, or underlying strength her body had left, they were actively draining away.
Just emptying out into nothing.
Right. It's a rapid exit of the body's ability to sustain itself.
It aligns perfectly with the momentum of Via we saw in the first house. The system is moving too fast, and the reserves are just violently emptying out to try and keep up.
It's a systemic cascade failure.
Now, House 3 is where I actually want to push back on you a little bit.
Okay, go for it.
House 3 represents communications, short journeys, siblings, and the immediate local environment. Essentially, the room you were in. We find the figure Pierre here, which means the boy. This is active fire, active air, passive water, active earth, 1121. You mentioned earlier that Pierre is this raw martial energy.
Yes, very aggressive.
It represents aggressive initiative, heat, conflict, rashness. But my immediate thought is, wait, couldn't that just mean someone was rushing to get the defibrillator?
I see what you're saying.
Yeah. Why do we automatically assume it's an argument or a rash mistake? Doesn't the context of a medical emergency change everything here? Couldn't Pierre just represent frantic paramedics breaking down the door to save her?
That is a fantastic point, actually. And you're right, context is indeed everything in geomancy. It very well could represent the frantic, aggressive rush of a 911 call or paramedics storming into the room.
Right, because they're taking action.
Exactly. Pure is martial. It is the energy of a soldier or a surgeon. It's cutting, it's fast, it's forceful.
So it could be a positive intervention, just a messy one?
However, and this is the big caveat, we have to look at the structural relationship within the whole chart. Pure is placed in the house of the immediate environment, sure. But the overarching root cause in House 4 is Rubius.
The figure of excess and volatility.
Right. If Pure just meant a helpful doctor running in, we might expect it to link to a more stabilizing outcome. But because it sits within this incredibly volatile, toxic matrix, it strongly suggests something else. It suggests that a forceful action, a disruption, or a highly heated exchange, whether that was a frantic physical rush or an erratic, hasty decision made right there in the local space, played a critical role in catalyzing the sequence.
Wow, so it wasn't just a reaction to the event, it might have actively driven it.
Exactly. It wasn't calm. The immediate environment was charged with aggressive, perhaps reckless kinetic energy that pushed the situation over the edge.
So it's the energy of panic or erratic action in the moment, regardless of whether the intention was good or bad.
Yes. The chart doesn't judge intent here. It just measures the destructive kinetic energy.
Let's move to House 6. The house of illness, strain, the actual disease burden or physical breakdown itself. And here, Via repeats.
Yes, the way.
We saw it in House 1 for the patient, and now it's in the house of the affliction itself.
This completely reinforces the biological momentum we talked about. The illness or the physiological burden was fast-moving.
It wasn't a slow burn.
No, this was not a chronic, stagnant condition that slowly deteriorated over months. It wasn't a slow buildup of arterial plaque that finally gave way.
Right.
The pathology itself was a rapid passage. The disease state was one of extreme transition.
It's like the illness didn't just happen to her.
Right. The illness was the acceleration. The speed was the disease.
That brings us to House 8. And honestly, here is where the literal nature of the chart becomes undeniable.
Yeah, House 8 is incredibly blunt here.
House 8 is the traditional house of death, crisis, and shared burdens. And the figure here is Amicio, which translates to loss. It is active fire, passive air, active water, passive earth. 1212.
It is profoundly literal. Amicio represents release, depletion, and the absolute surrender of what cannot be held.
Loss in the house of death. You can't get much clearer than that.
No, you can't. In the 8th house of a health crisis chart, it signifies a total emptying out. The crisis resulted in definitive physical loss.
It's just gone.
It is the ultimate letting go. But not as a peaceful, spiritual choice. It's a structural inability of the vessel to hold on to a life force anymore. The water is poured out of the cup.
And we see that heavy reality reflected over in House 9 and House 11. House 9 governs higher meaning, travel, and crucially in a medical context, specialists or higher medical authorities.
The experts who are called in when things get really bad.
Right. And House 11 governs friends, allies, hopes, and community support. Both of these houses contain tristitia, sorrow, passive fire, passive air, passive water, active earth. 2, 2, 2, 1.
3 passive lines weighing heavily down on a single active earth line at the very bottom.
It's such a visually heavy figure.
It is conceptually the heaviest of all the geomantic figures. Visually, it looks like a spike being driven deep into the ground or a person bowed completely over in grief.
Yeah, it really does.
It represents descent, burden, and profound structural sorrow. Placing this in the houses of specialists and allies paints a very clear, very sad landscape.
It shows the emotional fallout.
Yes, the networks around her, her friends, her community, and likely the higher-level medical specialists who were called in, they were entirely weighed down by the inevitable decline.
So they couldn't help either.
There was no hope to be found in these houses. There was only heavy structural grief. The specialists could not lift the burden. The situation was just too heavy to carry.
Which leaves us with House 12, the house of hidden causes, self-undoing secrets, and things completely unseen by the public eye.
The blind spot of the chart.
Exactly. And here we find conjunctio. Conjunction, passive fire, active air, active water, passive earth. 2, 1, 1, 2. I really have to ask you about this one. Conjunctio literally means a meeting, a linkage, or a crossing of paths. How does a meeting act as a hidden cause for a sudden death?
This is perhaps the most critical puzzle piece of the entire hidden narrative. The 12th house is what happens behind closed doors, and conjunctio is fundamentally about the combining of elements.
Combining elements, like mixing things.
Exactly. In a health and toxicology context, a hidden linkage strongly suggests a combination of substances, or a secret encounter, or intersecting physical vulnerabilities that violently compounded each other.
Oh, wow. So it wasn't just one thing.
Right. The hidden pressure wasn't just a solitary failing organ. It was a mixture, a crossing of paths that proved fatal. 2 things met in secret, and that meeting was the absolute undoing.
That is deeply haunting. A hidden combination in House 12, driven by a volatile root in House 4, leading to a sudden, rapid biological exit in House 1.
The chain reaction is entirely visible in the math.
This brings us to the terminal figures. For you listening, once the 12 houses are populated, the geomantic math generates 4 final figures that act as the narrative arc and the final verdict of the matter.
The summary of the whole equation.
Right. We have the right witness, the left witness, the judge, and the reconciler. Let's trace that arc. The right witness shows us how the matter began, the visible starting condition.
And the figure here is Letitia, which means joy.
Active fire, passive air, passive water, passive earth. 1, 2, 2, 2. It's visually uplifting, right? Like an arch or a fountain.
It is.
But how does a death chart start with joy?
It's a really jarring juxtaposition, but a very revealing one. Letitia represents uplift, grace, ascent, and celebration.
So things were actually going well.
It suggests that immediately prior to the crisis, the baseline condition was not one of visible suffering. The matter began with a high point.
Wow.
The subject may have been experiencing a moment of relief, a celebration, or a literal party. The atmosphere was elevated right before the drop.
But then we look at the left witness, which shows how things unfolded, what entered the situation to change that trajectory. And we have Caput Draconis, the dragon's head.
Passive fire, active air, active water, active earth. 2, 1, 1, 1.
What does that mean in this context?
Caput Draconis is the figure of entry, ingress, and initiation. It means something new suddenly entered the unfolding situation.
Something crossed the threshold.
Right. And if we synthesize this with the hidden conjunctio, the combination we saw earlier in House 12, this ingress could be the introduction of a new substance into the body.
Or a new person entering the room.
Exactly. The sudden arrival of a new person or a rapid new physiological shift that just entered the system out of nowhere. The joy and celebration of Letitia were abruptly interrupted by a definitive entry of something foreign.
And that leads directly to the judge. The final verdict of the chart, which is the mathematical summation of the 2 witnesses, and the judge is via the way.
The exact same figure of extreme, rapid transition we saw in the first house of her physical body.
The narrative arc is shockingly clear, and it's just terribly fast. It begins with uplift and celebration with Letitia.
Then something new suddenly enters the environment or the system with Caput Draconis.
And the immediate verdict, the inescapable mathematical result, is total transition and movement via.
The final verdict of the matter is a pure crossing over, a rapid, undeniable departure from the current state.
The speed of it is what's so overwhelming, but what about the reconciler?
As a reconciler is an optional figure generated by combining the judge with the first house. It shows what comes after the verdict.
The ultimate synthesis or aftermath of the event, and the reconciler here is populace, the people.
All 4 lines are passive dots. Passive fire, passive air, passive water, passive earth. 2, 2, 2, 2.
Populace, what does a massive crowd have to do with the physical aftermath?
Well, populace represents diffusion, collectivity, and ultimate passivity. It is a massive crowd, a swarm.
Ah, I see.
After the intense, rapid transition of via, what remains is the crowd state. And in the context of a beloved American actress and singer, this is incredibly poignant.
Because everyone is watching.
Exactly. It represents the multitude of fans reacting globally, the diffusion of the news into the public consciousness.
But what about on a physical level for her?
On a literal, physical level for the subject, 4 passive lines mean a state of total, absolute stillness. The violent momentum has ceased entirely. The crowd gathers, but the subject is completely still.
The silence after the crash.
Yes.
Okay, let's look at a few special factors that advanced practitioners use to pinpoint the absolute focal point of energy in a chart. The first is called the way of points.
Right. This is a technique that traces where the elemental energy mathematically concentrates in the reading.
And in this chart, the way of points leads directly back to house 3.
Which is occupied by pure, the figure of aggressive, rash action in the immediate environment.
So what does that tell us, having the energy point right there?
By the way of points landing here, the system is telling us that the energy and vitality of this entire event concentrates in local communications and immediate kinetic action.
So it wasn't just a background detail.
Yeah. Not at all. The erratic, heated action in her immediate surroundings wasn't just a side note. It was the driving force, the very catalyst behind the entire cascade of events.
So what does this all mean for the underlying intention or psychological driver? Practitioners calculate a point called the part of spirit to understand the motive or the animating impulse behind an event.
And that lands in house 4.
Right, house 4, which contains Rubeus, the violent, red, intoxicating figure.
This means the animating impulse gathered in danger, excess, and passionate disturbance right at the foundation.
It wasn't peaceful.
No, whatever triggered this event wasn't a peaceful letting go or a serene acceptance. It was rooted in absolute volatility. The underlying spirit of the event was chaotic and hot.
And the part of fortune, which shows the material outcome, the literal, physical reality of the situation, lands in house 8.
House 8 is the house of death, containing a missio, loss.
So physically, there is no hope there.
Materially, there is no rescue to be found. The concrete reality of the matter is pure release, physical depletion, and death. The material body is lost.
It's time to layer in another level of analysis. Because the geomantic chart is incredibly robust on its own, but traditional practitioners often used a secondary layer.
The astrological overlay.
Right, called the Girard overlay. This maps astrological signs and planetary placements onto the geomantic figures to give them more specific flavor.
And I should note, as our historical sources point out, while this is commonly known as the Girard di Cremona method, scholarly correction attributes it to Girard of Sabbionetta.
Right, an important historical distinction to make, even if we use the traditional terminology. To do this properly, we first need to do an essential dignity audit of the classical planets involved.
This is a crucial step that often gets overlooked by modern readers. We don't just throw planets into houses and say, oh, Mars means angry.
Right, it's more complex than that.
We have to know their structural condition, their strength or weakness, based on traditional astrological dignity rules.
Okay, give us an analogy for how dignity works.
The analogy I like to use is about being in your own house. If you are in your own house, which we call domicile, you know where the tools are, you have power, you're comfortable.
You can actually get things done.
Right. But if you are in a house that hates you, which we call detriment, you're stripped of your resources and forced to act out of character. We use the traditional 7-planet scheme: domicile, exaltation, detriment, and fall.
Okay, let's run the audit based on the specific placements generated for this chart, and I want to make sure we actually explain why these planets are behaving the way they are, rather than just listing them. First, we have Venus in Capricorn in house 2.
Okay, so Venus is the planet of comfort, connection, and soothing.
But it's in Capricorn.
Right. Capricorn is a cold, hard, restrictive Earth sign ruled by Saturn. While Venus isn't technically in one of the major traditional debilities here, it's not comfortable.
It's out of its element.
It's like trying to seek luxurious comfort and warmth while locked in a cold stone fortress. It's functioning, but it's austere and highly restricted.
Next, we have Mars in Aquarius in House 3.
Mars is the planet of heat, severance, action, and aggression. It wants to break things and move fast.
In Aquarius.
Aquarius is an air sign, also traditionally ruled by Saturn, known for sudden, erratic, or systems-level disruptions.
So you mix aggression with erratic disruption.
Right. Mars here isn't classically dignified or debilitated, but it's highly volatile. It takes the aggressive heat of Mars and gives it an erratic, unpredictable, almost electrical or mechanical quality.
Then we have Saturn in Leo in House 9. Now, Saturn rules Capricorn and Aquarius. It's the planet of cold, hard boundaries, time, and structure. It is exalted in Libra.
But it is in detriment in Cancer and Leo.
Right.
And this is the most critical planetary condition in the entire chart. Saturn in Leo is in detriment.
Give us another analogy for that.
Okay, so Saturn is the planet of austerity, discipline, and freezing things in place. Leo is the sign of the blazing, theatrical, center-stage summer sun.
Total opposites.
Putting Saturn in Leo is like asking a strict accountant to perform a complex tax audit in the middle of a burning disco.
That's amazing.
He loses all his power. His tools melt. He absolutely cannot impose order. So Saturn here is structurally broken and profoundly weakened.
Finally, we have Mercury in Scorpio in House 12.
Mercury is communication, exchange, and the mixing of elements. Scorpio's water sign ruled by Mars, secretive, investigating, hidden, and penetrating.
So what happens to Mercury there?
Mercury here isn't classically debilitated, but it takes on a deeply private, perhaps toxic or obsessive quality. It's the exchange of information or substances, but strictly in the dark.
This audit is incredibly revealing. Of the classical planets placed in this overlay, Saturn is the only one with a major traditional dignity status, and it is actively structurally weakened. It's in detriment.
It's totally handicapped.
The other planets are functioning without those major traditional strengths or weaknesses, meaning they rely almost entirely on their house placement and the geomantic figure they are paired with to express their nature.
Exactly.
So let's walk these overlay houses and see how they modify the core geomantic reading. In House 1, the ascendant, the overlay, places Cauda Draconis in Sagittarius.
Remember, House 1 in the core geomantic chart has via rapid movement, adding the zodiacal overlay of Cauda Draconis. The purging tail in Sagittarius to the first house acts as a massive accelerant.
Because Sagittarius is fire.
Right, Sagittarius is a mutable fire sign, known for expanding and moving rapidly outward. It aligns perfectly with the rapid exit of the dragon's tail and the momentum of Via. It's a fiery, expansive purge of the physical body.
In House 2, we have Venus in Capricorn overlaying the geomantic Cauda Draconis.
Venus wants to add a desire for comfort, ease, or material sieving. But as we established, placing it in Capricorn, a restrictive Saturn-ruled Earth sign, and overlaying it on the purging figure of Cauda Draconis paints a very bleak picture.
It's a total clash of desires and reality.
It shows that any attempt to find physical comfort or resource stability was entirely thwarted. The resources and physical vitality were still rapidly draining away, despite any deep biological desire for relief or stabilization.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, House 3 is where the tension really snaps. The core geomantic figure is pure, the aggressive, rash boy. The Way of Points targets this house, and the Gerard overlay puts Mars and Aquarius right here.
This is a massive, almost overwhelming reinforcement. Mars strongly amplifies the aggressive, heated nature of pure.
And Aquarius adds the chaos.
Aquarius adds that sudden, disruptive, erratic quality. It confirms that the local environment, the room she was in, was the site of sudden, highly disruptive and aggressive actions or communications that catalyzed this event.
It wasn't a slow fade at all.
No, it was an erotic snap in the local space.
Moving to House 7, the opposing forces or medical responders. We had Fortuna Minor, temporary success. The overlay places Caput Draconis in Gemini here.
Gemini is the sign of multiplicity, of pairs, of rapid communication and movement. Caput Draconis is the head of the dragon, the point of entry.
So what does that combo mean for the responders?
This strongly suggests a new entry of multiple people, perhaps a team of medical responders arriving on the scene communicating rapidly.
But they couldn't fix it.
Right, because the foundational geomantic figure is Fortuna Minor, Their arrival, their multiplied efforts, and their rapid communication acted only as a temporary measure. They fundamentally couldn't secure the biological situation.
Now, House 9, the specialists and higher medical authorities. The geomancy gave us tristitia, deep structural sorrow. The overlay gives us Saturn and Leo. And as we established in our audit, Saturn here is an accountant in a burning disco. It is in detriment.
This is where the structural failure of the response becomes totally apparent.
How so?
Well, Saturn represents structure, authority, and time. In Leo, it is weakened, out of its element, unable to impose necessary order. Overlaying a structurally broken Saturn onto the figure of profound sorrow tells us everything we need to know.
The specialists were powerless.
They were fundamentally disempowered. They were structurally unable to help, lacking the authority, the tools, or the time to halt the decline. Their failure to impose order led directly to that heavy, inescapable grief.
Finally, House 12. The hidden causes. The geomancy gave us conjunctio, the hidden meeting or linkage. The overlay places Mercury in Scorpio here.
This adds a deeply complex, shadowy layer to the conjunctio. Mercury in Scorpio implies hidden toxicology, secret exchanges, or deeply private actions that were central to the undoing.
So the linkage wasn't just happenstance.
No, the combination of substances or the hidden encounter wasn't accidental in a public way. It was facilitated by secretive or deeply private channels, a lethal mixture operating completely in the dark.
We have an immense amount of data here. It's time to pull all these threads together. We need to synthesize this into a single coherent narrative for you listening. Let's start by separating what was visible to the world from what was hidden beneath the surface.
Visibly, the public saw a sudden, terrifying transition. They saw the Via in the first house, a rapid shift in her physical state, ending in the absolute finality of restriction of Carcer in the 10th house.
So the public outcome was a sudden, tragic, concrete stop.
Yes, but hidden from view was the 4th house Rubeus, a volatile, dangerous, excessive root cause.
And crucially, the 12th house conjunctio combined with Mercury in Scorpio.
Right, a fatal combination, a linkage of elements or substances facilitated in secret.
And when we look at the timeline, the beginning versus the unfolding, it began with Letitia, uplift, joy, or celebration.
But an immediate, erratic intervention or entry totally disrupted it.
We have the left witness caput draconis, a sudden entry, paired with that highly volatile 3rd house pure, reinforced by Mars in Aquarius.
A sudden, erratic, aggressive shift in the local environment completely derailed whatever elevated stability existed just moments before.
And we must emphasize the stark difference between what was temporary and what was lasting.
This is a huge point.
Any interventions from others, the medical help represented by Fortuna Minor and the Gemini multiple responders in the 7th house, were strictly temporary.
They could not hold the line against the biological momentum.
The lasting realities are found in the 8th house of death, with a missio total physical loss and release, and the structural end in the 10th house with Carcer.
It's definitive.
So, to answer the profound question that was cast, how did this American actress and singer suddenly die? The chart answers by pointing to a rapid, unstoppable acceleration in her physical state.
Via.
Right. This biological shift was rooted in a highly volatile, passionate, or excessive foundation, Rubeus.
It was exacerbated by secretive, hidden combinations or chemical linkages, conjunctio and Mercury in Scorpio.
The literal catalyst was likely a sudden erratic disruption in her immediate environment, Pure and Mars.
And it was characterized by a complete failure of structurally weakened external medical support to halt the inevitable rapid transition.
It is a staggering testament to the descriptive power of this medieval system.
It really is. It doesn't give us a coroner's toxicology report name. It doesn't say she took this specific pill.
But it gives us the absolute structural anatomy of the event.
Yes. It was terribly fast, it was rooted in volatility, it involved a fatal hidden mixture, and the intervention simply lacked the power to stop the momentum.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with something to reflect on. We've mapped out the entire architecture of this event, we've looked at the math and the history, but there is always a lingering mystery in a chart this heavy.
There always is. And for me, the mystery remains anchored in the immense tension between House 3 and House 12.
Elaborate on that.
We have the Way of Points driving into the aggressive, rash Pure with Mars and Aquarius in the local environments, and we have that secretive conjunctio with Mercury and Scorpio in the hidden causes.
Those two nodes interacting.
It suggests that the ultimate key to the suddenness of this tragedy lies in a highly specific local interaction. A hidden combination of substances, a secretive exchange, or a rash decision made in the spur of the moment that crossed a biological line from which there was just no return.
It brings us right back to how human beings process sudden death. We always want a clean narrative. We want the simple cause and effect, the one villain, the one failing organ.
But the Earth tells a much more complex story.
It shows us how often the visible outcome, the cursor, the public finality, the simple headline, obscures a chaotic, rapid sequence of hidden interactions, secretive combinations, and volatile roots that actually build the tragedy.
The medieval minds who used this system understood that life and death are rarely simple. They are complex matrices of pressure and release.
We leave you to mull over these layers. The next time you process public news of a sudden loss, remember the invisible pressures, the frantic, temporary interventions, and the heavy sorrow that the headlines rarely have a capacity to capture. Thank you for joining us on this profound deep dive into the sources. Take care.